Dr. Eric, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh man, yeah, we have some kindred journeys, if you will, as well as with our listener in terms of this spectrum of leadership of life when it comes to running a business and and in our curricular and family and all these different levers that are pulling on our lives. You've experienced it at great lengths, and even just are talking about this idea of burnout, the conversation around that. That's not it's not going away, and you've got an interesting perspective on burnout, even the term itself. What comes to mind when I say the word burnout to you?
So, Nate, have you ever been burned out on hearing the word burnout? And I
Yeah.
think as I talk to groups, some people are like, I'm sick of that term. So, okay, because I don't think I'm burned out. So we hear people say that all the time. I said, okay, so I needed to do some more research on this. I said, maybe we're on a spectrum of burnout. We use that word spectrum when we talk about other disorders, certainly about autism, some things like that. Maybe there's a spectrum of burnout. Maybe it starts with being a little bit overwhelmed. So maybe one day we're a little overwhelmed, but we don't do anything about it. The next day we're a little bit more overwhelmed. Then maybe we start to say we're more fatigued. Then maybe we start using the word like, boy, I'm spent. I'm a little torched. And then as it keeps progressing, you might be in full on burnout, which is where I found myself. And it's an ugly place to go. So I think if we ignore some of those earlier things like overwhelm, we have constant overwhelm, that's a problem. If we don't address that, then we are going to get to that full on burnout stage.
Yeah, yeah. It's so critical, and I think about the trajectory of burnout. It's a it's eventually it turns into something where we see no opportunity for any further progress. I think that's one way we can describe this spectrum as you explain it. And it almost seems innocuous at first. Everybody can feel overwhelmed, right? I mean, we do. Things happen. I mean, at any point in the journey of a day, you can feel overwhelmed. I felt overwhelmed. Someone listening has felt overwhelmed. Might have been yesterday, might have been tomorrow, might be tomorrow, might even be today. That feeling of, okay, I have too much on my plate. Perhaps there's too much of a commitment, or perhaps things have popped up that I didn't expect in my day. And now I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Now, in your journey, when you felt overwhelmed, did you have a way of getting out of it, or did it start to snowball? And what were some of the factors?
Yeah, so it snowballed for me. So I'm a practicing dentist. I see patients 3 days a week at this point, but it wasn't always that way, and that was part of the problem. I hit the ground running when I started practicing. So my father was gracious enough to buy another dental practice, merge our practices together so that I would have an instant clientele, instant amount of patients that I could work with. The unfortunate part about that is day one, when I showed up to the office to start seeing patients, I was booked 6 weeks out. So I didn't get to gently ramp on board. My dad had been supporting this practice by himself, both practices by himself, for several months. He was ready for me to have it. And he says, here you go, it's yours. And so I didn't, and it's not his fault, but I didn't have much of an onboarding. And so the overwhelm kept stacking for me, and I kept adding things. Well, if I read this book, it'll be better. If I'm part of this group, it'll be better. If I do this, if I do this, if I do this. And eventually I found myself with way too much on my plate. And then the even more critical factor for me is that I wasn't taking care of myself.
Yeah, and if just about anyone listening has been to the dentist and has experienced the dentist. A day in the life of a dentist is interesting. I've analyzed this, especially because dentists and accountants share similar sort of patterns. There's a lot of practitioner work, a lot of production work. You're focused on your day of serving needs of folks. But not only that, you're in high demand as a dentist in terms of all the different people who need to see you in that day. And then you still got to run a business. You still got to make sure that bills are paid, people are paid. You got to make sure that the marketing is done properly, your operations, your systems are working well, on top of serving the needs of all of your clients effectively and in such a way that you're putting a smile on everyone else's face every day. And perhaps you've got to wear the smile even if the weight on your shoulders is almost unbearable.
Wow, Nate. Amazing summary. I appreciate that. You summarized it so well. One of the hardest things is having to be on all the time. You know, I hear people say, oh, you only see patients, you only work 3 days a week. I love that one. You only work 3 days a week. So people don't understand this career pivot that I've had where I'm seeing patients, but then I'm also coaching people and speaking and leading workshops and doing that kind of stuff. They don't see that. They see that, oh, you only work 3 days a week. Well, yeah. And those 3 days a week that I work, I am on 100% of the time. I just am. I don't get to go back to my cubicle and zone out for a little bit. I don't get to go check email. I don't get to do that. I'm busy throughout the day. And every person who comes into my practice has their own stuff that's going on in their lives. And one of the biggest guiding lights for our practice is we want everybody who comes into our practice to be seen, known, and heard. And to do that, we have to be extremely attentive. We can't take a commercial break while we have a patient in the chair. We have to be on. And that can be very exhausting. You're exactly right.
Yeah. So you mentioned something that is important. You made a choice at some point to make a change. And that is so critical because it's unsustainable. Feeling overwhelmed that leads you to eventually a place where, man, I don't know if this is even worth it anymore. I cannot continue at this pace. I always tell people, tax season, for example, I've owned an accounting and advisory firm. It'll be 30 years here in just a very short period. I could not imagine tax season year round. However, that is the pace really of your practice, right? It's nonstop. If you're doing things right, let's say, right, and you've got a good reputation, people are like, oh my goodness, I'm going to go see Dr. Eric and his team because they do fantastic work. Well, it's not, I don't know. You can tell me. I don't think your business is really quite seasonal, per se, right? People, if they got a cavity, they're not going to wait until winter to get it filled.
Yep. We really don't have a time where we say, oh, this is the off season. We just don't have that time.
Yeah, it's not April 15th ever or 16th for you.
Exactly.
And I think that's important to recognize is that I look at life as a series of seasons, whether they are in the month or in the week. And there's a seasonality to life that I think is so important of recognizing that there's a time and a place for work and there's a time and a place for rest. And especially in our, in our American culture, I'm not sure if you've heard of the Protestant work ethic. A guy named Max Weber way back in about 100 years ago, roughly, described this American style of labor, and it's very intense. If you go to other countries, of course not always, but many countries look at the U.S. and say, "Man, you guys work just too entirely much. I mean, you don't have lives. You just work, and then you get old and you die."
Yeah.
And I think we have to hit pause sometimes and recognize that it's okay to really start giving yourself permission to live. Really give yourself permission, and that's, I think, a starting place. And to ask you, at what point did you begin to give yourself permission?
Yeah, and this is part of why I'm so passionate about it, because I went so far down the road. And so I think a lot of people can can relate to getting to points where you're almost at the end of your rope, and then it settles down just enough. Like you can smush it down just enough, and then you keep going, and then it shows up again, and then you endure that, and then you shove it down, and it's good enough for now. I did that for a really long time, and it
Well,
wasn't.
let me ask you this then, based on that, and rewind just a little bit. Well, what were some of the patterns that you were facing? I mean, what was happening in your life?
Yeah. So I just felt maxed out all the time. I always felt maxed out, and I was always tired because I was doing so many things. I was doing a lot of stuff outside of the office as well. I was doing triathlon at the time, so I actually had a season where I was buying the practice from my father. I was building a new clinic. I was training for 2 Ironman triathlons. I was coaching both of my kids in soccer, and I was on 5 boards.
Holy moly, stop right there, man. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Any one of those is half a week's worth of work. Any one of those. And our listener for any duration would know a little bit about triathlon. I did try for a long time. And we're talking about, he's talking about 2 Ironmans. I mean, think about that for just a moment. The training for that, the training that's involved in that. I mean, you've got to swim 2.4 miles. There's a lot of training involved in that. You've got to ride your bicycle 112 miles. And then you have to do a full marathon, 26.2 more miles, which any one of those is a tremendous feat in and of itself. And you're training for 2 while running a full-time practice and on 5 boards.
Yeah.
Brother.
And the thing is, yeah, exactly. But the important thing I think, for people to realize, and I want people to say, oh, I can't relate to him. I'd never do all that stuff. But a lot of us have too much on our plate. And the reason we do is we added something. Then we added something. Then we added something. I didn't go from 0 boards to 5. I didn't go from no triathlon to Ironman. It's this slow burn, and it's the frog in the kettle that when you turn the heat up, it doesn't realize how bad it is until it's too late.
Spoiled. Yeah.
Yeah, it's too late. So I got to a point where I was going to sell my practice and walk away because I didn't see any other way out. I said, there's no way I can be happy in dentistry. There's no way. I just need to escape. And the problem was burnout was going to follow me no matter what I did. I had a plan in place to sell my practice to one of my associate dentists that worked for me. And 2 months before it was going to happen, I was starting to get some momentum. I'm like, oh, this is going to happen. 2 months before it happened, he was in a horrible car accident on the way to work on a Monday morning, which Monday mornings were ground zero for me, bad enough the way they are. And then he didn't show up for work. And then we heard sirens. And it was one of those moments that I had to step back. First of all, I'm like, oh, crap. I'm going to be twice as busy as what I was. And that proved to be true. But when the dust settled on that a little bit, a couple months into it, I thought, what do I really want the rest of my life to look like? Running away from this probably is not the right strategy because burnout's going to follow me. All this stuff is going to follow me into whatever I do. I need to step back and what do I really want to do? So I realized that I want to help people. So I like being a dentist. I want to help people. So I started doing some writing, and I started just having really deep conversations with people, hearing their struggles, what they needed, how can I help? And then I was able to get a partner to buy half of my practice. That was about 3 years ago. We're still working together. He's awesome. He knew part of my plan was to step back to 3 days of clinical dentistry. And so on the other days, then I'm able to do other things that bring me joy. So I come in here and I'm switched on for the 3 days. And then the hope is that I'm able to leave most of the stuff here. And then I'm able to do the other things that I love to do. And part of the reason I feel like each of us is on a journey. And our journey can either be used only to benefit ourselves, or we can take the lessons that we've learned and we can impact other people with the lessons that we've learned. And that's what I want to do.
Love it. Was there a time during that process that you were unsure or second guessing yourself in that?
You mean when before I sold it, when I was
Mhm.
going to sell it, or
Yeah,
when?
yeah. As you were thinking, I'm going to sell the practice, and then you made a shift and said, "Well, wait a minute. There may be another solution because burnout will follow me wherever I go."
Yeah, there was a shift, and the only way that shift happened is I started journaling,
And
and I started spending some time in quiet, which I had never done before. Quiet was quiet may have saved my life. Just spending time in quiet and reflecting and not giving in to always picking up my phone, not giving into what I love to call the false sense of urgency, which is the voice of should, and just really figuring out, okay, what do I want to do? Is there a way I can do this that isn't all in? The part that was burning me out so much is that I felt like I had to be everything to everyone in my practice. Now that I have a partner, I don't feel that way anymore. We can figure things out together. So people are feeling hopeless in their jobs and feeling really despair. Um, take some time. What is it that you really want in life? And in your current job, are there some pivots that you can do to make it so it's not so overwhelming? Just
yeah,
a few things like that.
yeah. I love the journaling. I love the quiet aspect of it, and you're bringing that up. And that's we 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 live in this world of efficiency, and we think if I did so much more, I would be so much more efficient. And we forget sometimes that sometimes if you do less, you can give more of your best. And that efficiency then becomes, I think sometimes we ask the wrong questions because we think efficiency means doing more. But we can actually become more efficient if we listen to our bodies, listen to our minds, our spirits, our emotions, and nourish them. As you mentioned, I think that quiet time of reflection is a wonderful time to nourish. And I had a similar epiphany when I had we got our first puppy, and I was walking that puppy every morning. I thought, oh my goodness, this is so inefficient. I got so much to do. Now I've got to walk this dog around. And then, and sorry, all the dog lovers, but I became a dog lover. Let me finish the story here. As we began to bond over that time, I began to cherish that morning walk time because it was quiet. There were no distractions. I wasn't getting any emails or phone calls or text messages. And initially, Eric, I brought my phone with me and I would get some work done. I would just because it's right. It's like you said, it follows you. It follows you. And then, Nate, why don't you just turn the phone off altogether? Just enjoy and be in the moment and the quiet of this walk and absorb the nature around you. And we started taking a 45-minute walk every single day. And of course, my dog's not talking too much unless there's some kind of an animal or another pet walking. So we're just enjoying that time, and it's so freeing and it's so life-giving to spend that time in quietness and reflection. Of course, you took it to the next level of beginning to journal and really take your thoughts and manifest them on paper, organize them, be able to really take a deeper dive into the journey of life you talk about, and beginning with, of course, I love beginning with the end in mind, right? An old Stephen Covey is saying to, hey, what's the end game here? Where's this going? And because that's really a measure of vision. And if we don't know where we're going, any road will take us there. Of course, we know this. We know that vision is essential. Without vision, of course, people perish. This is nothing new. However, we don't take a hard look at it. We don't take a hard look and say, okay, my trajectory isn't taking me where I'm going to look back at my life and be satisfied and fulfilled in that. So what do I need to change in my own journey? And you took those steps.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting, I love that you said less is more, because we are such a society of more. Add a pill, add a show, add this, add that, add that, add that. Maybe the answer isn't more, but it's a focused less, just like you said. And what's interesting from a productivity standpoint, so I was seeing patients 4 days a week. When I switched to 3 days a week, I only lost that was 25% fewer hours, but I produced 10% less.
Right.
So I really got very interested in efficiencies. How can I do things better? And I let my team in on where I was at. I was really honest with them about my burnout and what I was struggling with. And some of my team members stepped forward and said, how can we help? We have a little bandwidth. How can we help? And so I learned for the first time really how to delegate some things. And man, it was really great. I was at a class recently, and one of the talks that the person did was, do you want to do $10 work or do you want to do $1,000 work? Because we spend too much of our time doing $10 work when we have the opportunity to do really efficient work that is within our wheelhouse and within our strength. And that's really where we need to use our time and use our energy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the vulnerability and the transparency in your decision making to involve the team, and because, well, the old saying, a cord of three strands is not easily broken. There's so much power in the collective intelligence and synthesis of a team who care about not only one another, but care about the experience we're all tasked to deliver. And you as a leader, you're human. I'm human. You're listening. You're human. And people know that. People know, and it's not a bad thing. It's never a bad thing to say, hey, here's a struggle. Here's a problem. Of course, within appropriate ranges of the practice and whatever you're doing. And all right, let's put our heads together. Let's find a solution. And it's amazing what happens when you not only delegate, but what you're sending a message is, hey, I trust you. I trust you to help me so that we can make this better.
Yeah. Yeah. I would argue that if you don't delegate, if you feel like everything has to be on your shoulders, it's a weird form of pride. You're kind of being a martyr is really what you're doing. And you are telling your team that you don't trust them to do it. If you want to empower your team, give them some things to do that help you out and elevate them. Boy, that's awesome. When you can do that, then you have people who more likely, as we were talking about earlier, more likely to feel a part of something.
Yeah.
And that is what people are looking for right now. We need to show them that we trust them, within normal boundaries. Give them a little bit, see how it goes. Give them a little more, see how it goes. Check in with them to see how they're doing. But often you find that you hired these people for a reason and that they're more capable than maybe you think they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so good. And knowing where your genius is and where you best serve the people who you are aligned to walk alongside of in leadership, and you recognizing that there are different there's different strata within the organization, letting that go so that you can work in your genius is essential really to effectiveness in your leadership as well as mine. And I'm preaching to the choir. I'm a doer, you're a doer, someone listening, we're all doers. Okay, great. So this is it's so important to hear it manifest itself. If you're in a place, Eric, someone listening is in a place right now and they say, Dr. Eric, Dr. Nate, you don't know what I'm going through. I don't even know where to start. I can barely breathe with how I'm feeling burned out. What do you say to that person?
I don't know every detail of your situation, but I do know that I found myself having panic attacks on the server room floor in my office when I was a half hour behind. I had 5 hygienists waiting for me, and our server had just crashed. I've been to a really low rock bottom, crying my eyes out on the floor, trying to figure out how I was going to get up and get back in the game because, oh, by the way, it was 9:30 in the morning and I don't even get lunch until 1. So if you're feeling that way, I just need you to raise your hand. I just need you to raise your hand. And whether you raise your hand to your journal and start writing some of it out, you raise your hand to me and say, hey, I just need to have a conversation. Raise your hand to someone and start the conversation, because when you keep it to yourself, when it's all inside, it has so much power over you. And I will tell you, there was hope. There is hope. There is hope. It does not have to be this way. I haven't met someone yet that we can't go to work on life design and help them figure out how to have more hope than they currently have.
Indeed. Indeed. There's always hope. That nothing is a catastrophe as long as we can breathe. As long as we're still alive, we can move forward. That is the beauty of the pulse you have, the heartbeat that you have. It means that there's still hope for tomorrow. It's a good thing. And knowing that perhaps today may be my darkest hour. And that is going to be part of the amazing story as I share in the future of how I have overcome this obstacle. And what I'm hearing is we don't do it alone. We're not islands. We're not isolated. We need to have community. We need to have fellowship. We need to have mentorship and leadership and coaching, and those who can share a word of encouragement, of affirmation, of inspiration, of direction, of attitude, of application to take the smallest step. Even the smallest step forward is a step forward. It's a step out of the darkness into the light.
It is. It is. And the light shines brightest in the deepest darkness. So just don't give up. Don't give up. Don't get stuck believing this is as good as it's going to get. So I was stuck there for a long time. It's a scary place, but there is hope. There's a hope there is hope that you can move forward. There is hope that you can have impact. There is hope that you can find peace. There is hope that you can find meaning. There is hope. Don't lose it.
Yeah, I love that. So you're in a place now where are you still having panic attacks?
No more panic attacks. Nope. I actually felt the beginning of one starting to build within the last couple of weeks, and it was because I was overloaded. It was I was slipping back down into some of that overload. But I saw it starting, and I have a couple built-in buffers during my day now in my schedule, because I know I need that. And so it was buttoned up right against one of those buffers, and I came down to my office and just sat and did some deep breathing for a little bit, thought about some things I was grateful for, and it was gone.
So you were able to recognize that now and dissipate it. It's so critical to have those buffers, those mechanisms in place in our day. Not just our week or a month or a year, but in our day, whatever it looks like for you. For example, you talked about Mondays. Mondays used to be the same for me and many, many people. Someone listening, I'm sure Mondays are the dreaded day after the weekend and all of the emails and work that needs to get done. So Monday was my dreaded day. And one thing you mentioned is, and this is a recurring theme when we're talking about as we move to a close, is that we have control over few things in life, not everything, but few things in life. One of the things we have control over are the choices we make. And one of the choices we can make is we can choose to modify and give margin and change our schedule. We can do that. This is a great thing. So I made Monday, no appointments on Monday. I made Monday the day to have some cool conversations, and I record almost all of these wonderful interactions we get on the podcast on Monday. People are like, "Oh my goodness, Nate, why do you schedule your podcast interviews on Monday?" It's because it's a for me, these conversations are part of my buffer. These conversations are a way that I am rejuvenated and recharged because I get to interact with wonderful people just like you, Eric, who are encouraging and inspiring, and they give life. You give life. And so I want to start my week with that. I want to start my week and end my week. My bookends of my week are this life-giving interactions, because now what happens with Monday? Man, I am looking forward to Monday. Monday is like, oh, I can't wait for Monday to get here because I'm going to get to meet Eric. We're going to have some cool combos. And I can't wait for everything to happen. Now I'm ready. I'm mentally, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, I'm ready for the week. I'm prepared. And then having those pieces in place through the week, find those holes in your week, friend. Find those places in your week where you feel most out of tune with the possibility for excellence in your week, and then give yourself margin in that time. Build a space where you can have the bravery to embrace what you need to bring yourself into a place of harmony, of peace. That to me is like, if there's one thing that we can do, like right now, after someone listens, is look at your calendar, look at your schedule. And it might hurt a little bit, right, Eric? Because it hurts a little to let go.
Yep.
But it feels even better after we have.
Yes. Yeah. We have to have courage to believe that it could be another way. And also have courage to say, okay, I'm going to give myself a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. It doesn't have to be a lot. Get up and walk around the block. Stand by the window and do some power poses. Stand with your feet spread wide, hands on your hip, looking out the window for 2 minutes. Do things like that. Very deep, intentional breathing. Write down 3 things you're grateful for. Reflect on the last great thing that happened in your life. Or schedule something so you can anticipate the next thing. All of these things we can do. They're not difficult, but we just don't do them because we're always maxing out, and I can check more email, and I can be more productive, and I can do my phone routine, and I can do all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one of my team members says, Nate, do one thing every day that makes you happy. And I love that. Then that's because there's an intentionality behind it, and there's a focus, and there's a drive, and there's excitement around it. What's one thing? So, for example, even if I don't have one thing that is propped up that day, I know one thing that makes me happy is to send a message to my spouse or my son that's encouraging. And so even if I don't have anything in the pipeline, if you will, like, you know what, it's going to make me pretty happy to just send a message. And so sometimes my wife, I'll pick out a corny song from the 80s, a ballad or something, and I'll type in, or even it could be a Beatles song. I'll type in a few of the lyrics, because, it's so cheesy and loving, and she'll name that song and she'll get a laugh out of it, and so will I. Whatever it is, build it into your day. And Eric is living proof of the progression, the journey, if you will. And I also love that, it's possible that some of those things prop up again. We've never arrived without some recognition that, I'm still human. There's possibilities, but here's what I'm building into my life to help me through this. Eric, I got one question before we hop off, and sometimes I get to ask this of our guests, and I'd love to ask it of you. One day, we will be at the end that we began with many years ago. Hopefully, as you live your life, when you look back and you see all that you've done, all the people you've gotten an opportunity to encourage and bless. And what is one thing you would like others to have said about you?
I would like others to say he was a good ally. I'd like others to say he was a good ally. And that means I was in their corner. I was on their side. I was willing to help. That's what I want to be in this life.
Well, my friend, you are on your way.